Good morning, everyone. I am Nathalie Champion. I am one of the co-chairs of the Honolulu Board of Realtors DEI Committee, and I am so pleased to welcome you all to our webinar, which we are presenting to kick off our winter GMM. So thank you for taking the time out of your morning to learn about fair housing and Long Island Divided. I am incredibly honored to be a part of the DEI committee. And for those of you who don't know what we are or what we do, we are a committee that is dedicated to help educate realtors in Honolulu to make sure that you understand fair housing, you practice diversity, equity, and inclusion on the in your interactions with your clients. I am I'm also very pleased to introduce Maria Arrieta, who is our co-chair, and both of us are going to be moderating this panel. And we are very much looking forward to seeing you on Friday during the winter GMM. The DEI committee has a table that we're going to be with multiple members of the DEI committee who are going to be there, and please stop by and see us. It's going to be something that we're going to do during the morning before the luncheon. So you can come by, check us out. If you have not done the Fair Haven Challenge, we will be more than happy to show you what that is and get you situated through NAR so that you can take the Fair Haven Challenge. We are going to be there probably starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we'll go on until about noon. So without any further ado, I would very much like to welcome Bill Dedman and tell you all a little bit more about him. So we are incredibly honored to have Bill with us today. He is a Pulitzer and Peabody award-winning investigative reporter. He is also a New York Times #1 best-selling author, and he is a keynote speaker, which is why he's here this morning. He received the Pulitzer Prize for investigative reporting for The Color of Money, which was his report in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on racial discrimination based by banks and savings and loan associations in middle-income Black neighborhoods. He's also spoken to meetings of the Federal Reserve, HUD, and banking and real estate associations. Now, Bill was one of the lead reporters on Newsday's undercover investigation, Long Island Divided, which is the documentary that we'll be talking about today. Newsday revealed that Long Island's dominant residential real estate brokerages helped reinforce racial segregation through illegal steering of customers. Newsday's team received several national awards for their work, and the aftermath of that journalism is still happening today. Bill also uncovered the case of the reclusive copper heiress, Uget Clark, documenting her life in reports for NBC News. His nonfiction book, which was a #1 New York Times bestseller, Empty Mansions, tells the true story of Clark and his father and her father, the Gilded Age industrialist who founded Las Vegas. Bill is a frequent speaker for financial planning groups and charities on lessons from the Clark family's failures in estate planning. So thank you, Bill, for joining us today.
Thank you, Nathalie and Maria. It's good to be with all of you. Aloha. It's nice to be back in Honolulu on a cloudy, rainy day here in Connecticut. It's exciting to have an opportunity to share with you an inside look, let's say, at our Newsday team's work on fair housing. You know, it might surprise you. It certainly surprised me that the real estate industry has responded positively to a newspaper's investigation of the industry. We don't get a lot of that. But it seems that our Newsday team's testing on fair housing has sparked an important conversation, at least, and action, with industry leaders saying these are practices that have to change and change soon. Let me give you a couple of examples. When the head of Realogy, America's largest real estate company, now called Anywhere Real Estate, but you know it owns Coldwell Banker and Century 21 and other brands. When that CEO says, hey, we should be testing our own agents and brokers for steering and unequal treatment of customers, well, then something has changed. And when the National Association of Realtors says, hey, we will help brokerages and associations of realtors that want to do their own testing, we'll help make that happen, NAR says, then more change is coming. The thinking seems to be, if we don't get ahead of this, police our own industry, we'll have more government investigations, and we'll keep having these embarrassing media investigations. Besides, there's a recognition that it's the right thing to fix this, and that fair housing is the law, not just in April during Fair Housing Month. My goal for this session is for it to be helpful to you and also challenging, giving you some things to think about. How can unequal treatment creep into our day-to-day work, even in a thoroughly multicultural community like Honolulu and its environs? Now, together we can dive into looking at a few clips from our Newsday video showing real estate agents in action, admittedly, perhaps not on their best days. And we'll focus on best practices, steps that brokers and agents can take to increase the chances of treating everyone fairly. We'll also talk about one of the most difficult questions: what can agents say about schools? How do you handle that question? Which are the good schools? I start with this perspective. I assume that all of you want to make sure that every customer who calls or emails or walks into your office is treated fairly.
I want to say congratulations, Bill. As Nathalie mentioned, you won a prize for an investigation into mortgage lending practices. And I thought it might be interesting for our viewers to hear a brief summary of that investigation and how does that investigation compare with this one?
Yes, Maria, there are several connections and lessons to be learned. The stories, as Nathalie mentioned, in the Atlanta newspapers were called The Color of Money. You can read those online. And these stories were about redlining, the practice of mortgage lenders, particularly banks, doing business on only one part of the map. Well, to be clear, collecting deposits from all parts of the map, but making loans in only some areas. Now, this was back in the late 1980s, and redlining had gotten a lot of attention earlier, but seemed to be thought of as something from the distant past. We found lenders making home loans in Atlanta's white areas, even lower income white areas, but not, for example, in Black areas, even the higher income Black areas in Atlanta that are home to executives from Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines. We found patterns with different racial mixes in Milwaukee and many other cities. Now, notice that the customer would have no way to know where the banks did or didn't make loans. But we looked at how the banks operated. We found differences in where branches had been closed in one area and opened in another, even an area of lower income. We found differences in which real estate agents the banks were marketing their services and rates to. Even differences in which branches would accept a loan application. Now, let's connect that to a project at the Boston Globe in Massachusetts in the 2000s, looking at something you might think at first is disconnected, traffic stops. Our series was called Speed Trap, and you can read it online. An interesting thing about being stopped by an officer for speeding is that, in your lingo, we're all pre-qualified for the speeding ticket, right? But some people, when the officer stands at the window and makes a decision, some people may get a break that others don't get. What we found in Massachusetts, when we looked at every traffic ticket and every warning in the state, was that it was pretty easy to predict who got the ticket and who got a warning if you knew the race, sex, and age of the driver. Women, for example, more often got a warning, especially younger women. I talked with a college student. We found in the records she had gotten 4 warnings in 3 weeks. Women, does it surprise you that this break runs out at about age 40? Minorities much more often got the ticket for going the same speed, especially Black and Latino men in Massachusetts. Notice that again, the customers, we'll call the drivers customers, wouldn't know. Maybe even the officers wouldn't know how it breaks down. Now, taking together 3 very different stories, redlining, traffic tickets, and our focus today, steering and real estate. What are the lessons? First, the absence of complaints tells you nothing about whether your office is obeying the law. Bank customers, drivers on the highway, real estate customers have no way to know if they're being treated equally, right? If you get a warning or you get a ticket, did everyone else going that speed that day get the same? In real estate, a fix for steering can't be just to say, well, we respond forcefully to all complaints. Who would know to complain? No one knows what listings were given to another customer. Second lesson, diversity efforts alone will not solve this problem. For example, diversity in hiring and promotion of staff is useful in many ways in your business and mine. We do a better job gathering news if we reflect our community. But it's not a cure-all. People often ask, well, were the minority real estate agents also discriminating? Yes. Some of them were. You'll see this in the videos. And it's just as illegal. We found real estate agents of all races and backgrounds steering customers, just as we found police officers of different backgrounds treating minorities different from whites. We should no longer be surprised about this. Treating people who are similarly situated, treating them differently is illegal, whether you're in their group or not in their group. It may be time to stop thinking of fair housing as a diversity issue, something nice to have, we'll put up a poster, and start thinking of it as a risk reduction issue. Third, small actions. Small policies can have a huge impact in creating or perpetuating a segregated system. For example, it seemed clear that the real estate agents in our tests didn't have a standard, a checklist for what they do and don't do with every new customer. We saw customers come back with thick folders of information about schools and neighborhoods, others with skinny folders or none at all, and they'd seen the same agent. That seems like something that you can fix. Do agents have consistent ways of qualifying customers? Do agents in your office ask credit scores or income of everyone? That's okay. Or no one? That's okay. Do you require pre-approval for a mortgage for every buyer? That's legal. Or do you require pre-approval from no one? You'll help them. You'll train them up, get them ready to buy a home. That's legal. It's in between where you may have a policy, but some people get a break that others don't get. That's how you end up on YouTube. Let me show you an introductory part of our documentary film. The project is called Long Island Divided. We called the film Testing the Divide. And they're both at the same link, which we'll share with you. It's simply newsday.com/divided. In this clip, one customer receives service from an agent, while the same agent refuses to help another customer in the same circumstance. Let me play this clip for you. It just takes a second.
But you don't want to go there. It's a mixed neighborhood.
Mixed neighborhood.
If agents are courteous and professional, how can you know that they're treating you equally compared with someone of a different race or ethnicity?
I have to say it without saying it, you know.
Behind smiles and handshakes, how do you know if they're giving you fewer options or suggesting different areas?
I'm not going to send you anything you want to do unless you don't want to store your car to buy your friend.
Or that rules don't apply to you and another home buyer in the same way.
Yeah, okay, I definitely need that.
Long Island is one of America's most segregated suburbs. Newsday set out to discover what role real estate agents might play in keeping it that way, potentially affecting the quality of lives.
Technically, as a real estate agent, you shouldn't tell the buyers.
In house hunting, it's nearly impossible to see evidence of hidden discrimination. You would never know unless you go undercover.
In one test, Johnny Mae Alston was the black tester and Cindy Parry was the white tester. And they met with Anne-Marie Quealy-Bichon at Signature Premier Properties office in Cold Spring Harbor. They asked for the same thing. As often happens, the agent discussed getting pre-qualified or pre-approved for a mortgage by a bank, showing how much a buyer can spend on a house.
Pre-qualified, I guess. My husband's working with somebody in a bank. We've done some preliminary talks, about getting pre-approved.
Neither had been pre-approved or pre-qualified. Here's what the agent told the black tester.
So I really need that. I won't take out any money unless you have a pre-qualification limit. So I need to. So that means I can't pre-qualify for a mortgage. Oh, so that means I can't go out to see anything. I won't do it. You can try another person, but I don't have the time.
And without pre-approval, here's what the agent told the white tester.
What is your availability? When can you start looking at houses? I would say not this coming week.
Cindy received 79 listings from this agent. Johnny Mae couldn't get any listings. And Cindy, the white tester, received 2 home tours. They had the same finances, the same budget, and they made the same request in the same area. But one was white, the other was black. The agent treated them differently.
Thank you, Bill, for the this introductory video. I am fascinated and dismayed to see what comes next. And so I have to ask, why did Newsday even start this investigation?
Yes, Natalie, well, why is the newspaper sending out testers? Now, some of you may know the New York City area, but to set the scene, Long Island stretches east of New York City into the Atlantic. Long Island's a suburban area with almost 3 million people in 2 counties. And Long Island has a lot of diversity overall, not much different from the demographics of America altogether. People of all races and nationalities. But in our area, minority groups, especially Black and Hispanic homeowners, are concentrated in very few communities. For example, out of more than 200 communities on Long Island, a majority of the Black residents live in only 8 of those 200. Now, is that by choice? We had long heard from Black home buyers, including our own colleagues on the staff, that encountering problems if they tried to shop for a home outside of those few areas. So our team followed the methods used by fair housing agencies, sending out testers, people posing as home buyers, with the addition of hidden cameras to record video and audio. Now that hidden, unannounced recording of audio especially is regulated differently in different states. It's legal in New York, it's legal in most states, it's legal in Hawaii. Most state laws say that recording is legal if one person in the conversation knows that it's being taped. And that one person can be the home buyer, the tester. Hidden recording of audio is not legal in a dozen states, California, for example. In those states, everyone has to know they're being recorded. But even there, no one's off the hook. We can still do testing. For example, we can monitor the texts and emails sent between testers and the agents to see what they ask for, what they're given. And most of all, we can see the listings that the agent gives to each tester. The main reason we did testing is it's the only way to see reliably what is happening. Were our tests done fairly? What was the result? You know, our testers often came back from the real estate office to the newspaper office, telling us that agent was so nice. She was so helpful. They only learned the truth, whether they were treated better or worse, when our team brought the 2 buyers together to watch videos and to see the maps of the listings that the other person was given. In this video clip, you'll meet a few of our testers, and you'll also hear from a fair housing expert who works with them. And then you'll meet one agent, a second-generation realtor in business with his parents, who had a different game plan for different customers. Let me play that for you, just a moment.
It almost makes me wish that the racism is more explicit so that I would know about it.
Too often I hear people who maybe aren't as familiar with this kind of work say, oh, well, they were just testers. But all you have to do is tell someone, which I have to do on a fairly regular basis, that you were turned down because of your race, and tell them the circumstances that occurred on a particular test. And you will see just how real and painful that injury is.
Elmont, you know, it's okay, it's good, you're very close to the city. Some of them are not as nice, you know, Elmont.
I do remember him, he was nice, and I do remember him pointing out on the map.
Oh, he loved that map. I remember that.
Yeah, he had the map, and he's like, you know.
Some of these towns, in my opinion, are not necessarily the greatest in terms of school districts, safety, you know, crime, resale.
The agent with the map, he looked like General Patton planning the invasion of Sicily. But it turned out that he had a different invasion plan, a different plan for home buyers of different races. For the minority buyer, it was you might like those neighborhoods. For the whites, it was don't get off the highway until you get past those neighborhoods. It startled us when some agents began their presentation to new buyers. Remember, these were new customers they had just met, with guidance that violates the fair housing laws. I hate to say it, but for those agents, it seemed that steering was part of the service that they were selling.
I want to say thank you, Bill, for reminding us that steering wasn't something that we needed to just memorize when we were taking the real estate exam, and that it's very present within us today. But please give us a summary of the test, who was tested, and what was the outcome.
Thank you, Maria. The home buyers, our testers, gave the agents the same circumstances. They were first-time home buyers, so selling another property was not involved. We tested only for race and ethnicity. We did not test in this test for other elements of the fair housing law, which we'll talk about. We didn't do tests based on religion, national origin, ancestry, etc. We just did race and ethnicity. We chose testers of the same gender and age. We dressed them in the same business casual style. We bought shirts that were similar for the men. I went shopping at Nordstrom for similar purses for the women, so there wouldn't be a class difference. I told the clerk, I really like these styles. They asked for the same geographic areas. They asked for the same price range. They asked for the same number of bedrooms. They had the same family size, the same number of children in the public schools. And they were prepared to give the same income and credit scores, but rarely were asked anything about their finances other than what job do you do? And are you pre-approved for a mortgage, on which they were the same. We shopped for houses at different price ranges. Now, it was always the same price for two testers who were paired up together. We did tests from an entry level. Now, on Long Island at this point, entry level was about $400,000, very few single family homes below that point. So we did tests at 400, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, up to $1 million, 3 million, 7 million. Now, $7 million won't get you Alec Baldwin's house out in the Hamptons, the exclusive resort area on the east end of Long Island, but it would get you into his neighborhood. But then you'd have Alec Baldwin for a neighbor. That might not go well. Now, how did we pick the agents? How did we decide who gets tested? Did we pick those who had reputations for steering? No. Did we pick them based on their color? No. We didn't pick them at all. We let the brokers pick which of their agents would be tested, though the brokers didn't know they were doing the picking. We just walked in. Whoever was doing desk duty to handle walk-ins or phone calls or internet contacts to the brokerage, that was our agent. And then we made sure that the second tester saw that same agent. Notice that we didn't have to do this. Under the law, brokers, you're expected to provide the same service to two customers, even if they see different agents. Well, that would be harder, wouldn't it? We thought it would be a fair test to see what would happen if the customers saw the same agent. So we made the test as easy as possible to pass. We gave the brokers a break that the next test by a fair housing agency might not give you. We did 86 of these tests, 86 pairs at 12 companies, 12 brands. And we chose them because they're the largest in our area. They have the most agents and the most listings. Together, those 12 represented more than half of the listings in our market. Familiar names: Keller Williams, Coldwell Banker, Century 21, Remax, as well as regional brands that are big only on Long Island. We didn't feel comfortable being the referees, so we had two fair housing experts review each test, the listings, the videos, for equal treatment. One you met runs a fair housing agency and has done testing for the US Department of Justice. And our other referee is the law professor from the University of Kentucky who writes the legal textbook on fair housing law. Only if both of our referees independently threw a flag did we call a penalty on an agent. So this was not a drive-by investigation. This was a careful effort that took a team more than 3 years. Now the results. Let's just look first at who was treated differently one from another. Asian American buyers were treated differently than their white counterparts 19% of the time, so 2 out of 10 on average. Hispanic American buyers were treated differently than whites 39% of the time, 4 out of 10. And African American buyers were treated differently than whites 49% of the time, 5 out of 10. All of those numbers seemed surprisingly high to us, especially considering that we're more than 50 years down the road from the passage of the Fair Housing Act. Out of 12 companies, only 2 companies passed all their tests. One was the local Sotheby's International Realty, and another was a very small regional brand. Those 2 were the only 2 of the 12 to pass every one of their tests. We did multiple tests. If we tested an office, we tested at least 3 times. So it's fair to say that most of the national and regional real estate companies were contributing to the racial segregation in our suburbs. Well, you no doubt have already asked yourself the most important question. Would the results be any different if we repeated the test in Honolulu, in your communities, in your schools? If this weekend, home buyers of different nationalities went shopping in your area, they asked for the same price range, they had the same circumstance, they had the same requests, or Christians and Muslims and Jews, or straight couples and gay couples and singles, people with children or without. If they're searching for homes with the same criteria, then on Monday morning in their email, will they be receiving the same listings? That's the test. Let's talk about what kind of differences we saw. First, we just saw different amounts of service. Overall, our white testers got 50% more, that's 50% more listings than their black counterparts. We saw differences in how buyers were screened. Some agents refused to help our black or Hispanic buyer unless they signed an exclusive contract. They said, that's the policy of our brokerage. And that would be legal. But the same agent didn't require a contract from the white buyer. And we saw steering. For example, the agents in our tests gave listings directing 1 out of 4 of our minority home buyers, 1 out of 4, into different communities and different schools altogether. No overlap with the areas that the same agent gave to the white buyer. And then there were inappropriate comments by agents, making comments about the race or ethnicity or religion of people who live in an area. Or comments about the schools, comments about crime, comments about resale value as a way of discouraging someone from looking in those areas. That's steering too, especially when the agent gives contrary information or leaves out that advice for the other buyer. It was fascinating. Our non-white buyers were not subjected to racist comments or inappropriate remarks. We're long past the days of signs that say whites only. Now it's more subtle. Only the white buyers in our videos were told inappropriate comments about race or about its proxies, schools, crime, and resale values. Here's a video clip. It's unpleasant and an ugly clip, I admit, highlighting this problem of inappropriate comments. Let me play that for you. Okay, everybody ready?
Hispanic community came in, and they really took over Springs and North Gardens Woods area.
Here, an agent gives conflicting advice about Freeport.
I like Freeport. Now you have a bad school district, and that's not good for resale value.
All the school bus, see the moms that are hanging out on the corners.
But you don't want to go there. It's a mixed neighborhood. Should be the United Nations.
Because you might be more comfortable in a certain demographic area that isn't heavily one way or another in terms of the people.
Bayshore has two school districts, Brentwood and Bayshore. You don't want to have Brentwood school districts. You want to have Bayshore school district.
I can't say anything, but I encourage you, I want you to go there at 10 o'clock at night with your wife to buy diapers. Go to that 7-Eleven. They didn't buy there.
No, that's great.
I have to say it without saying it. You know, you have the knowledge of the areas.
Yes.
You know. I don't want to use the word stealing, but I try to I use another word. I educate in the areas. You know.
Yeah. How are you, Russ?
Hey, Russ.
Good. How are you?
We're either waiting for the owner or waiting for the agent to show up.
You don't want to be. I don't think you should be in Elmont. I think you should probably just be Franklin Square.
And I remember specifically, he talked about steering.
Yes, that's what he said. Steering, yeah.
Yeah. And in the same breath, he mentioned, well, steering's bad, but this is what I'm going to do.
There's something called steering. No steering, you know, like steering.
Oh, like a car or something?
No, like a horse, even.
You know, it's possible. Well, let me put it this way. I regret a little bit showing you that clip of all the inappropriate comments. I regret it for this reason. It gets all the oxygen, doesn't it? I can't believe he said that. You know, I can't believe she said that. It does appear that some agents have gotten a message through the years that complying with the fair housing laws is some sort of political correctness, that it means not saying the wrong thing or not saying the wrong thing to the wrong person who might complain about it. One thing that which really got NAR's attention was that as you heard, the agents in our videos showed that they were aware of fair housing laws. I shouldn't be saying this. I don't want to use the word steer. And then did it anyway. It showed a hole in the training, right? A lack of empathy and understanding. The comments made by the agents were so far over the line that we may forget that these agents crossed the legal line earlier when they gave different listings to different customers who'd ask for the same thing, even without the illegal comments. Perhaps we need more attention to steering and differential treatment. More attention to what agents do, not just what they say. Are they giving the same listings? Are they providing equal professional service to all their customers?
Thanks, Bill, because really at the end of the day, it's important that we are held to a higher standard as realtors. We have fair housing statute demanding that we give equal treatment to our clients, no matter what their nationality or color or race is. So these clips are disturbing, and they do show steering, which is something which is important to talk about. Can you give us more information and elaborate a little bit more on how this kind of steering showed up in these tests?
Yes, Nathalie, steering can take many forms. It's sort of a catch-all phrase that we use to cover lots of forms of differential treatment. Now, we've been discussing this in terms of individual buyers, but turn it around and look at it for a moment, neighborhood by neighborhood. Both of our testers would ask for an area within, say, a half an hour commute of downtown, or within 20 minutes of Northport, a certain community. Well, that creates a circle around that community, and that circle may include many neighborhoods, many schools, and those areas may vary in race or nationality or ethnicity or religion. Sometimes in the wider residential parts of that circle, listings would be given only to our white buyer. Well, so we all see that's a classic example. The minority buyer was being steered around those communities. And that's what we were testing for. We also saw something else that we didn't expect. Perhaps we should have. And this has not gotten enough attention in brokerages. And I mention it because this is an area where new lawsuits under the Fair Housing Act are likely to occur. We had minority areas where no one of any race was given the listings. These minority areas or schools were within the circle for both testers. There were homes for sale in the price range that both gave, but the agents didn't send those listings to either tester. Have you ever heard an agent say, oh, well, there are some places where I won't look, or there are some areas where I won't send you? That's what was happening here. In our area, these were the communities with more than a modest amount of Black population. The agents ignored or skipped over those areas for all buyers. That's steering too, even if they treated both testers the same. They didn't treat the neighborhood the same, you see? And the sellers in that neighborhood are protected by the fair housing laws. The agents in our test had more than 200 opportunities to share listings in the 8 largely Black and Hispanic communities in our area. And out of those 200, they shared listings in those communities only 15 times. This is a dangerous practice. And let's talk about what effect it has. In that case, not only are the home buyers being harmed, remember, both the white and non-white home buyer are being harmed under the law by not being given full access to available homes in minority communities meeting the criteria that they asked for. But also the communities themselves are being harmed, the governments, the schools. And here's where you may see new lawsuits. Also harmed is anyone who's trying to sell a home in those areas and their listing brokers. All of these could have a lawsuit under the Fair Housing Act against the brokerages that are routinely steering everybody around their communities. And we all understand why, right? Fewer buyers means lower sale prices. lower commissions, lower home values, lower home equity, less money for a homeowner's retirement. This is where the wealth gap comes from. Less money for sending the grandkids to college. And for the communities, less tax money for schools and parks and libraries. So when I gave you figures before, 1939, 49% of people were treated differently one from another, but in almost every one of our tests where there was an opportunity, both buyers were asking for listings which would have included, they gave a circle that included minority areas. In most of those cases, the agent skipped over that area for both buyers, also violating the law. Now, here's a video clip with a classic example of steering, meaning directing buyers to areas that match the buyer's race. In this example, you'll see an agent tells one family, now this is a man shopping for himself, his wife, and their teenager in the public schools, tells them that a community is a good place to live, it has the nicest neighbors. While the same agent warns another family, that's a man shopping for himself, his wife, and their teenager in the public schools, warns them that the same community is a dangerous place. Let me play that clip for you.
Kelvin Toon is a black man in his early 50s, and he went in to meet with an agent involving a test in the Brentwood community, a community that is 80% Hispanic and black. The agent communicated to Kelvin, our black tester, that she enjoyed meeting with clients from the Brentwood area.
Every time I get a new listing in Brentwood or a new client, I get so excited because they're the nicest people.
When we sent Kelvin's counterpart in to meet with the same agent, the white tester was actually warned about Brentwood not being a nice place.
The nursing home we need to be near is in Brentwood.
Okay.
And so we found a couple that are in Brentwood.
Pretty close to each other.
Okay. And it just seemed like those would be handy also for going.
Do you want to
visit.
give me them and I'll look into them for you? Or?
Yeah, I can do that.
That warning came later to the white testers saying there was concern about gang activity going on in Brentwood. This agent wanted the white tester to know, but that information wasn't provided to Kelvin, the black tester. The listings centered black tester Kelvin in Brentwood with 27 house listings, while the white tester got 0 listings in Brentwood and was directed towards much whiter neighborhoods.
Think for a moment about the point at which that agent went astray. The text message about the gang activity, that gets all of our attention, but focus on the listings. Remember, both men were asking about an area that had Brentwood at its center. They asked for the same thing. Homes were available on both days in their price range in Brentwood. She sent listings in Brentwood to the black family, but for the white family, she ignored Brentwood entirely and went farther afield. Even when the white buyer went on a home tour outside of Brentwood and said, hey, we printed out from online some listings in Brentwood, you know, they're closer to our search area. This is a person in the water being thrown a life preserver. And even then she didn't show those listings. And she sent a note about gang activity. The comment about crime is a problem, but don't lose sight of the main thing. Why didn't she give both families listings in the same area that they asked for?
You know, when I look at that video, Bill, I have to reflect on our day-to-day activities, timelines, deadlines, contingencies, and we get so caught up. And I want to know, do you think that the agents included in this documentary were knowingly steering? some of the agents may believe that if steering was unconscious or unintentional, that it wouldn't rise to the level of violation. Can you address that today?
Maria, this is an important question. Some agents did whisper or say out loud, I shouldn't be saying this, but that's the real estate equivalent of, hey, buddy, would you hold my beer? Something bad is about to happen, get your camera. But the first point to keep in mind is that it doesn't matter at all if the bias is intentional or not. The Fair Housing Act and your state law cover behavior, not thoughts or motives. The law is not a mind reader. It's the effect of your action, not your intent, that matters. This isn't a criminal law, it's a civil law. If a real estate agent is treating one person better than another similarly situated person, and the difference between them is one of the 7 categories in the Fair Housing Act, the agent and the broker have violated the law. Let me share some slides with you. Take just a second. I want to show you the federal and state categories. Fair housing law. Here, we're going to share that with you. Okay, here we go. I think you can see that now. And we're listing here the federal protected classes. Now notice that the Fair Housing Law protects everybody. If you have a religion or what your religion is, or you don't have a religion, you're still protected. If your family status is, I don't have a family, you're still protected. The federal classes are race, color, sex, which has been interpreted by the courts, meaning not just gender, but sexual orientation or gender identity, not just male or female at birth. Religion, national origin, disability. By the way, disability is where all the action happens. That's where all the complaints are, because you can take a picture of it. You know the wheelchair doesn't fit through the door. You know if you got a accommodation with a parking spot closer to the building, or you didn't. Most of the complaints are in disability. That doesn't mean that's where most of the violations happen. And familial status. Those are the 7 protected classes under federal law. Hawaii law protects additional classes, which overlap in many ways. You protect all the same categories as the federal law, plus these: age, ancestry, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, all covered under the interpretation of the federal statute. But age and ancestry are different. Marital status, which is somewhat different concept than family status, right? And HIV or AIDS diagnosis status. Those are the protected classes under Hawaii law. Now, so although intent doesn't matter under the law, it is important for us to think about, why do these violations happen? It's interesting to speculate it, and it's important. If we want to stop something from happening, we have to think, why are people doing it? We understand that bias can be explicit, intentional, race prejudice, for example, within our consciousness. That's one thing. Maybe relatively rare. Bias can also be implicit. Some scientists use the term unconscious bias, referring to this being an automatic process, almost like an instinct that we may not be aware of. But by whatever name, it means that people who want to be fair may still act in unfair ways. We all understand people are treated differently based on their identity, their appearance, their skin color, their name or other indications of national origin, their hairstyle, their tattoos, their accent. Let me give you an example from our study of real estate agents. Notice that we didn't flunk anybody for this. No one failed because of babysitting, as I'll explain. But this has to be an example of implicit bias at work. It can't be a planned policy, explicit prejudice. The agents in our tests were far more likely to tell the buyer where the agent lived. The agents were far more likely to say, oh, you're looking in Northport. I grew up in Northport, or my kids went to the Northport schools. More likely to give that sort of personal information or that sort of endorsement of the area when the buyer was white. Non-white buyers were far less likely to get that sort of information. One of the agents offered babysitting help to our white buyer. Oh, you're looking in this area. I have a friend who could babysit for your kids. If you buy and move in here, you've got a babysitter. But the agent knew that our other buyer, our minority buyer, had kids too, knew that she was looking in the same area, and the agent didn't even mention that she lived in or knew people in that area. You're in an affinity business, right? Oh, I see that you went to San Diego State. My brother-in-law's second wife went to San Diego State. Well, we're bonding. I'm your agent. It's an affinity business, sales, right? It appears that some of our agents were making an affinity with our white buyers and not with others. Some agents, if we think about other motivations for steering, may have been assuming, consciously or not, it doesn't matter, that the person of color couldn't really afford homes in the price range they gave, or wouldn't qualify for the mortgage and would be wasting the agent's time, while accepting the price range without question from a white buyer. That's a form of profiling, based on a surface characteristic, making a judgment. One of the tricky things about profiling is that it's so ineffective. Experts in several fields, such as law enforcement, say the real problem with profiling is that it distracts us, it wastes our time, it doesn't work. Let's say you want to stop school shootings from happening. That's your job. Well, which kids play violent video games, which kids dress a certain way or fit some other profile, these are not good predictors of who will be a school shooter. School shooters are as likely to come from good homes as bad homes, good grades, bad grades. As any parent understands, a profile may fit too many good kids and waste our time, and may miss the kid who's planning an attack. What are better predictors? Stockpiling weapons, having grievances at school, telling other students of plans, even vaguely, don't be in the cafeteria on Thursday. You see, activities related to the business at hand, to an attack. Similarly, religion is not a good way to identify who's a terrorist. Counterterrorism experts say they would waste investigative resources on the millions of innocent people who fit a type, who look like some type in a picture, and might miss people who are doing behaviors that show they're planning an attack. See the difference? It's not what they teach us on TV shows, but profiling makes us less safe. Well, in real estate terms, you're in a commission business. You leave money on the table if you assume that people can't be good customers because of what they look like. So why do it? Some agents may just think of it as a shortcut. They'll make money faster with less effort if they show people homes. You saw an agent say to a white buyer, well, you might feel more comfortable in this area. They just met. Why should this agent assume that this buyer wants segregated neighborhoods? Why even assume that this man she's meeting in a coffee shop isn't already married to or the parent of someone of a different race or nationality or religion? Besides, did we mention steering is illegal? Agents could fear that appraisers or lenders may be biased, making it harder to close a sale. There's a lot of evidence going back for decades and right up to this year, a huge study by Fannie Mae, actually I think it was Freddie Mac, it was Freddie Mac, of appraisal differences. And there are well-publicized examples of home sellers whose appraisal went up hundreds of thousands of dollars when they removed evidence that a non-white person lived in the home. So this is an old issue, it's getting new attention. Meanwhile, the legal burden is on you to treat every customer fairly. There's a final logical explanation for steering, which is just outright prejudice. I think it's possible that a few agents are doing it on purpose, but I assume that's not really the common situation. There's just too much steering going on for it to be accounted for by only bad people doing it. Good people have to be doing it too.
Yeah, that's a very good and astute point. So I kind of want to shift the focus just a little bit, because here in Hawaii, where you go to school is a huge topic of conversation. It helps kind of people place you on the social or cultural map. In this study, what role did schools play in the actions of these agents?
You know, over and over on the videos, we would hear agents explain to our buyers everything is decided by schools. Agents touted one district over another. Oh, that one's blue ribbon, this one's declining, or that's in demand. That would be a mistake. You don't want your kids going here. Often the agents gave different information to different buyers. Now, I think I remember reading that Hawaii has one school district, one statewide district. Am I wrong about that? It's interesting to hear that you still have the same variations among schools. America's schools vary by race and characteristics of the students, right? So that means that directing someone to a certain school is the same under the law as directing them to an area with a higher or lower minority population or population of a different national origin, even if you don't talk about demographics. Whether you talk about race or national origin in steering doesn't matter. It's the effect of your action. You know, it's a shock, but America's schools are more segregated now than they were in 1968, the year Congress approved the Fair Housing Act. And of course, school segregation and housing segregation are intertwined because we have lines that neighborhood schools, districts, lines that tell us, if you live here, you go to that school. Now, the Fair Housing Act doesn't say that you can't talk about schools. Our legal advisors were clear on this. Agents can answer factual questions about schools. Agents can refer customers to information such as on the state education department website. The legal problem, they said, arises when the agents are picking and choosing districts, especially when they pick and choose different districts for different customers, or make comments about school test scores, about demographics, to steer some customers away from certain schools. Here's a bit of our video, and you'll meet the law professor who was an advisor on our project in this clip about schools. Let me play that for you.
I said, do you really want your future children going to Amityville School District?
We're going to try and stay away from Freeport, Roosevelt, Hempstead for now because of the school district.
This part, the Salisbury part, is in demand because the schools are much, much, much better.
In Newsday's 86 paired tests, Agents often applied a laser-like focus on school districts, highlighting their perceived quality when recommending places that house hunters should consider buying or avoid. Fair housing experts say touting or disparaging school districts can put agents in jeopardy because talking about school districts can be taken as a euphemism for race.
There's a few districts that I know I would I won't look in those towns.
Oh, okay.
You know, like Freeport and Baldwin and Amityville, which is part of Massapequa schools, but it's just certain parts of Massapequa.
If the customer asked about the quality of the schools and the agent responded with accurate information, I think the agent would be fine. The problem with talking about differentials in schools is that at least in the last 10 or 15 years, that has been a proxy for race. They don't mention the race of the community. Good schools are available in these areas. Those areas I'd stay away from because they have poor schools. I want to ask, did you tell that to the other tester? If you're only giving that information to one tester of the two, and the only difference is the race, then you've provided what I call differential service.
If you're in Massapequa, you only want school district 23. Okay. You don't want 6 in Massapequa because that takes in Amityville, and you're not going to like those schools.
That last agent, the agent writing down lists of schools, sent 2 buyers who'd asked for the same thing back to the newspaper office with very helpful exhibits, 2 lists, completely different lists of schools. The clear advice from NAR and from our legal experts is to limit your information to answering factual questions, or to refer the buyer to factual information online from, say, the state education department. But stay away from the trap of using or responding to opinion, such as good schools or nice schools. These are not facts. NAR actually keeps trying to warn its members, saying realtors are not experts in schools. Why not? Well, first of all, schools change and different people want different things in a school. Some want the band program and some want lacrosse. And if you're judging what schools are best, if you're using those ratings that proliferate on realtor websites, those ratings are built mostly on school test scores. Write this on the blackboard 100 times. School test scores don't tell you how good a school is. School test scores tell you, as educators know, how educated are the parents who send their kids to that school. Notice how circular it is, a self-fulfilling prophecy. In America, education and wealth of parents is a very good predictor, not perfect, but very good predictor of their children's test scores. And in America, race is a very good predictor of the parents' education and wealth. You see the problem. A so-called high-performing school may just be coasting. It's an area with better educated parents. Those kids came into the 3rd grade as National Merit Scholars, but the school takes the credit. Steering parents, or just the white parents, around schools with lower test scores perpetuates segregation by income and race. It has a disparate impact on some groups compared with others. That's why it's illegal. It's more public spirited and it keeps you within the law to tell parents, hey, you got to do your homework. It's okay to tell customers that there are fair housing laws for good reason that apply to what any agent can say about schools. It's okay to tell parents, if schools are important to you, talk with other parents, chat with the principal, visit the schools, go see the teachers in the programs that are important to you, and then decide. If they were buying a boat, if boats were important to them, they'd go look at boats.
That's exactly right. I'd like to underline and highlight the fact versus my opinion. And what I love about what you just said, Bill, is that my opinion may be different than yours, and that may present a problem. So sticking with the fact versus the opinion can simplify everything else that we do. And I'd like to know with that, what was the reaction from the real estate industry and the government when all of this was uncovered?
So Maria, I'll go through this part quickly. Often people ask what happened to agents in the videos, and most of them are still practicing. We know that disciplinary hearings in New York State are continuing, and a couple gave up their license to avoid facing the charges. A couple won their case because the state didn't do any investigating. It didn't bring in our testers or the listings, and the judge said, I can't take somebody's license away for that, and that seems fair. We did see all the agents and their brokers. They were subpoenaed to appear before a state Senate committee hearing. They were sworn in and testified. And the agent who said, follow the moms who are waiting to meet the school bus, and then you'll know if you want to live in that area. She said, I just wanted my buyers to know where the bus routes were. The brokers, everyone said, nobody broke any law, nobody did anything wrong. They didn't mention race. And if they didn't mention race, then it wasn't illegal, right? And the legislators in New York knew better and made changes to New York state law. And just very quickly, those changes, which I mentioned because they tend to creep from state to state, these sorts of changes. These changes were supported by the New York State Association of Realtors. Testing, who pays for the testing? The industry, $10 every salesperson's license renewal, $30 for a broker, that's paying for the testing. If there are fines, where does the money go? To pay for more testing. And the key thing, I think, is that the state now has, every broker and agent in New York State now has on their website what their policies are in 3 areas. Is pre-approval required? Do you check ID? Do you have to sign an exclusive contract with that brokerage? And any answer to those 3 questions is fine, but you have to apply the same standard to every customer. That's completely new. There was a settlement. 3 brokerages got together and settled a case with the New York State Attorney General and paid $115,000 as a fine. That's about 1 side of the commission on the sale of about 8 houses on Long Island. Not a lot of money. Nationally, there's really been more reaction. Starting with NAR's program, you can read about it separately. It's called ACT, Accountability, Culture Change, and Training. A very vigorous response from NAR. And I just want to mention a couple of elements of that quickly. Under accountability, NAR has been working with state associations to review state laws on training and handling complaints, making complaints public, making clear you can lose your license for a fair housing complaint. Think about that. That's a trade association trying to toughen state regulation of its industry. That's completely new. And NAR is working with associations and brokers that want to test their own agents. Now, that wouldn't be public testing. You wouldn't hear about it, but you might lose a place with a brokerage. And that seems to me like it has real long-term positive effect. If you knew that your company might be testing you, if a broker knew that he might be or she might be tested on whether or not 2 different agents are treating 2 different customers the same, that would get the broker's attention, right? NAR also has increased its training. You have a Fairhaven challenge, and I'll mention and endorse Fairhaven, which was designed as a response to what NAR saw in our Newsday videos. Fairhaven is essentially a video game. It takes about an hour to go through it. You can see it at a booth at your meeting tomorrow. Fairhaven is really a situation where you're trying to close deals as the customer or as an agent, and fair housing issues come up. You answer questions and they show you videos showing what went wrong. People have said they found it really educational and injected some empathy because it shows you the customer's side of that fair housing issue. A lot of associations are encouraging all their members to go through Fairhaven. It's free. It takes about an hour. We've shared the link. It's at fairhaven.realtor. NAR also has a new 3-hour CE credit class on implicit bias. And that's an effort to get at people of goodwill who may not be aware of how quickly one can invoke a stereotype to make a decision. Culture change, NAR says, may be the hardest part of this. If you think about it, it's a long, ugly history of blockbusting, redlining, steering, subprime lending. And I know that you all know that your code of ethics endorses fair housing, makes it a core component now. You may not be old enough like me to remember that for 50 years, that same code of ethics prohibited showing a home in a white neighborhood to a non-white person. You may not remember that NAR opposed the passage of the fair housing laws. So as NAR's president has said, even if all these bad practices of government and business were in the past, even if they had stopped, they stopped today, the legacy of them, the wealth gap effects of them and home equity would continue for generations. In general, I think that NAR's response in training, culture change, and trying to inject some accountability, some cops on the highway to give speeding tickets, in general, these are positive changes that have taken this issue seriously.
Agreed. It seems as though these steps are very useful in combating this discrimination. I want to remind all viewers that today is the last day to take the Fairhaven Challenge. So if you can take the simulation today, it's a short, great video game that helps you understand things from the perspective of your clients. And I have taken it a couple times, and every time I take it, I learn something new. So please take just a couple of minutes out of your day and check it out. We will be having the results of that at the DEI table on Friday to see which companies have the highest ratio of agents who have taken the Fairhaven Challenge. So I urge you to just take the time and see what you think you know might not be actually what you know. It wasn't what I like I said, I learned something new every single time. So, you know, beyond this Fairhaven challenge, beyond the bias override course, which I believe HBR is working on getting and should be featured in 2023, which is fantastic. I think we're going to put a link in the chat about that bias override course. Besides those things, and also kind of based on this investigation, what are other ways you think are important for us in our business to combat racism in real estate?
Yeah, Nathalie, let's just talk a little bit about best practices, specific steps, because solving racism seems like a tough task. Let's talk about how do we increase the chances that we provide equal service in our business. You know, our team of journalists would often discuss, well, how hard would it be to stop steering? why don't the brokers just stop it from happening? How hard would that be? It did seem clear that many realtors in our test were unfamiliar with minority neighborhoods. They didn't know about the beautiful new homes on the water in some of the areas they were steering around. It seemed clear that they hadn't put their agents on a bus and gone for a tour of all the neighborhoods to blow apart their stereotypes or how they think things used to be. There may be a lot more variety in communities than they're aware of. We also noticed that our large real estate brands had more than 200 offices in our area, but not a single one was in those communities where most of the Black residents live. They didn't represent many sellers in those areas. In terms of practices, it made me wonder whether brokers make an effort to know whether steering is happening in their offices. Brokers, do you check on which listings the agents give to customers? What did they ask for? What did they get? What other areas matched up with what they asked for, but they didn't get them? We're going to talk in a second about a form to help you keep track of that. Think about a map of where your office locations are, where your agents represent sellers, a map of what listings your agents hand out, and now picture those maps in court in a fair housing case. The records to prove steering are in your computer system. They're in your MLS. They're in the listings that your agents share. Now, NAR makes several specific suggestions for best practices, and I want to share those with you. First, I'm going to give you a 1-minute clip from the professor, Bob Schwim from Kentucky, our legal advisor, who really steps up to the plate on this question of how hard is this to do it right? Here we go. All right, this is a quick clip. Watch out, he takes a swing.
I'm a law professor at the University of Kentucky, and I've been a law professor for a long number of years. All we're asking in these tests, you get two people who come in and ask for exactly the same thing. Why don't you give them the same listing? Why don't you pre-qualify them in exactly the same way? It's not that big a burden. This is a law. This should be treated like a tax law or any other law. You have to obey this law, and particularly if you're in a licensed business like real estate agents, if you can't obey the law, you ought to just get out.
Told you he was going to take a swing. Now, I think the hard part, of course, is that I assume you all want to obey the law, that this wanting to is not really the issue. So let's talk about specific steps to increase the chances that you and your colleagues are providing the same service to every customer. Let me share those slides with you. First, every customer should receive the same behavior from you. Show no more interest for one customer than another. Let's say at an open house, you give people a show of some hospitality, a cookie, a drink. Do the same for everybody. You're on camera. Follow up with every customer contact in the same enthusiastic manner. Checklists are used when something's really important. Surgery needs a checklist. Landing an airplane needs a checklist. Because even if you're having a bad day, you're distracted. That day is going to get better if you put down the landing gear. Using checklists can help you make sure that everybody in your office provides the same information to customers, that you have the same procedure even for assigning new customers to agents, the same procedure for explaining your services, for sharing referrals, for gathering information from the customer, for telling about the fair housing laws. Everybody who's a buyer or seller should leave your office or your first meeting with them with the same handouts. If they're testers, they're keeping track of that. Develop standard answers or scripts for your brokerage, not just for yourself, on the difficult questions such as which schools are good. Convey the same helpful information to everyone. Similarly, you can use templates, drafts of emails and text messages for communicating with customers to ensure that you give them all the same information and guidance at each step in the process, for answering a buyer's inquiry, getting ready for the closing, etc. Talk about the property, not about the people. Identify objective information about what the customer wants. Talk about the type of housing available, market trends, etc., but not demographics or populations. And you see the difference between, hey, go drive around and see which neighborhoods you like. That's actually good advice. And follow the school bus and see which moms are waiting on the corners to meet the bus. You see the difference there. Stick to factual information, not opinion. The reputation of a community is not a fact. Safe is not a fact. Declining schools is not a fact. Refer customers to primary sources of information. If they ask about crime, send them to the police departments. If they ask about schools, have them look at the state education department report card on the schools. Qualify customers in the same way. If you require a buyer agreement, pre-approval, if you check ID, do it for nobody or everybody. Give all the listings that fit their objective criteria. They want a corner bedroom, they need a waterfront view, they need a bedroom on the main level. These are objective criteria. Don't substitute your judgment for theirs. A buyer who has no idea what the buyer wants should get every listing in your MLS. When they say, oh no, I can't have, I've got to have a garage. Oh no, we need more than 2.5 bathrooms. Well, then they get fewer listings. And when they pick a school district, they get fewer listings. Remember, you have an obligation not to discriminate against sellers or entire neighborhoods under the fair housing laws. Educate buyers and owners about the law. You're at home with diversity certification, your Fair Haven simulation, these are useful. You can explain that the same rules apply to every agent. Now, I understand some buyers insist on discriminating. If an owner or a landlord insists on saying, don't bring certain people here, people from there, I don't want them, or no children in the apartments, it's not a community for older adults. You can discourage that, and if they won't listen, you can tell them they have to get another agent. I understand that you have an obligation to follow the direction of your client, but that obligation ends if the advice breaks the law. This has gotten a lot of attention in the industry lately. Discourage love letters, or the sort of pick me letters that say, oh, please accept our offer in a multiple offer situation. Can you imagine a letter from a buyer to a seller that doesn't disclose any information in its pictures or text about their age, religion, national origin, family status, marital status? I guess it's possible to write such a letter, but have you ever seen one? Talk with your lawyer at your firm or your association about whether or not you can tell sellers, I won't pass those letters on to you. That's what NAR urges you to do, is to make clear up front, I'm not passing those letters on. Or I'm certainly not passing them on if they contain any information divulging your protected class. Why? Because they tempt the seller and the seller's agent into committing a fair housing violation by picking buyers who look like them, or put them in a situation where they'll be accused of that. Present offers with finances and terms that are significant, all the key facts, but the buyer doesn't need to know the names because the name divulges information about protected classes. You can use a checklist, a spreadsheet, a standard form for divulging. We have 4 offers, and that's great. And here's their terms. They don't need to know the names. NAR has a form for all this. It's called the Equal Service Report. It's a form for documenting customer contacts. It's in the broker's manual. And it's a form, and we can share a link with you afterwards. This is NAR's #1 tip. Brokers, use the Equal Service Report so that your agents are recording what did the customer ask us for? What did we collect from them? What did we give them? What did we require of them? So you can review, because it's your license on the line, whether or not equal service is being provided. Now, I'll stop that slide. I'll leave that up for a minute. Actually, I'll just leave that list up for you in case you want to take a picture of it. We'll share these slides with you. I just want to give you one closing thought in my time here. We're talking here about people who are similarly situated being given different service. And let's suppose it was your task to solve that in a different area. Let's say that your governor asked you to solve the problem that some people going 15 over and a 30 get a ticket, and other people going 15 over and a 30 get a warning, which is an unequal application of justice. And when you examine it, some types of people get a break more often than other types of people. We want to fix that. And that's your assignment. How could you fix that problem? How long would that take? Well, you could retrain all the police officers. I guess that wouldn't be all bad, and raising awareness would be good. It sounds expensive and time consuming. You can increase diversity on the workforce, right? But as we've seen, diversity in the workforce doesn't necessarily mean that people will be treated the same. You could give everybody a card that says, if you're discriminated against today by your officer, call this number. But remember that drivers and customers have no way to know how anybody else is treated. So who would know they're being discriminated against? That won't fix it. Putting up posters for Fair Housing Month doesn't fix steering. You could send out testers. You could have people driving fast through school zones. But I don't know, something about that doesn't seem like it's really going to solve the problem. Enforcement may be good, but what would fix it? I know you can't get elected governor on this platform. I understand that. But we all know what would fix it. If you get pulled over for speeding and you get a ticket, you won't be surprised. As the professor said, why don't you give everybody all the listings? Why don't you pre-qualify them all in exactly the same way? I cannot imagine any solution that would satisfy the broker's need to know that you'll treat 2 people the same, or that 2 of you who work remotely and part-time in different offices will treat 2 buyers or 2 sellers the same. How in the world can the broker ever have any reasonable assurance of that unless you give everybody all the listings that they ask for? If you're pulled over for speeding, you get the ticket. I think it's a 5-minute problem to solve. And then we can go on to tackling harder problems. I hope that this has been of some help to you. I'd like to hear other questions if we have time for them, but I urge you to share our film with your colleagues and your customers. It's simply at newsday.com/divided. But more than that, have a conversation about it. How do we increase the chances that people are treated fairly? Don't have a conversation about who's the bigot in our office. I don't think that's likely to be very helpful, and it's not the problem. Have a conversation about what's our brokerage's answer to which schools are good. What's our procedure for making sure everybody gets the same pieces of paper, the same listings? That will take you, I think, most of the way there. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate you listening, and I'd like to go wherever you want to take it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill. And really thank you to everybody who's taken the time out of their busy morning to become better at our careers, at being a better realtor, at being able to serve our clients in a better form and fashion. I would love to just, if somebody from HBR could maybe get like a little snapshot of us on this Zoom call, that would be great, because I think that having conversations like this is challenging, but without it, no growth can manifest. If you don't know that there's a problem, there's never going to be a solution. And I think that this is such a great opportunity for us to have hard conversations, because nobody wants to perceive of themselves as a racist or of themselves as not treating people equally and fairly. But if you don't know, how can you ever get better? Which is why I urged you to take the Fair Haven Challenge. It's so educational. It's such a wonderful way to see where you could be a better advocate for your clients, to see where you could protect your clients from themselves, and to just be better at our careers. There was one question that somebody posted, which I would love to ask you, Bill, before we take a quick break and get ready to come back and talk in our panel about specific things to Hawaii, specific issues. And somebody asked, are stockbrokers, doctors, or attorneys being investigated in this same way? Now, how can you?
That's an interesting question. Stockbrokers, for example, if you're a stockbroker, you know that you're regulated by the SEC, and there are fines and disciplinary actions that are issued publicly against stockbrokers. Some businesses are more regulated than others. Plumbers are less regulated than real estate agents, but even there's a building code, and we rely on the plumber to say, oh, the way you want to do it there, yeah, that would be cheaper, that would be faster, but I can't do it that way. If I tie that in that way, it won't pass inspection, it won't meet the building code. We rely on professionals to keep us legal. If I try to get my automobile mechanic, relatively unregulated business, except for some consumer complaints. But if I rely on my auto mechanic to say that's not street legal, I can't put that on your car. And you're in a pretty regulated business. It's not the most regulated. Bankers might think that they're the most. Bankers have a Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. They're required to put down the race of applicants for loans so that we can go look at the pattern for every lender. You're in a regulated business and you have the fair housing laws. What we have is a situation where we've had those laws for more than half a century, but they haven't been much enforced. Many realtors are hearing, I think for the first time, wait a minute, it's a violation of the law for me to always steer around those neighborhoods? Yeah. And enforcement's going to make that point. When in Toledo, the people being steered around and their agents sue the people who are doing the steering around them, that word's going to get around, and that'll be a hard lesson for the industry. But in general, we have a Fair Housing Act that's mostly been dealt with by complaints. Somebody asked how many complaints are there? Not many. There have been some cases settled in Hawaii, mostly about rental issues, some having to do with language issues or nationality issues. But most of the fair housing attention from fair housing groups through their testing, from complaints to HUD, from lawsuits in federal court, those are the enforcement mechanisms. Most of that attention for more than a generation now has been in rentals, not in sales. And steering has been lightly touched on in training. Training hasn't been very good. That's why we're getting new training. So these are not new issues. The number of complaints tells you nothing about the number of violations because nobody would know they're being steered. So that's the key thing to keep in mind here. But yes, other areas have their regulations. This is yours. If you want to be a licensed professional, as the professor says, then this comes along with the business. And we have these rules for good reason. Segregation being enforced on people is evil. It's a good thing that we have the fair housing laws. It's not a good thing that they haven't been much enforced. And it has led a lot of people into saying, hey, this is a new thing. Where are all these new? Well, none of this is new at all. This has been the law for 53 years.
I appreciate that, Bill. Thank you very much. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back and talk specifically about fair housing in Hawaii, about how we can best serve our community here, and about specific issues here, which are very different than the contiguous United States, and some things that are similar. So thank you, Bill, again. This was incredibly informative, and we will see you all in about 10 minutes. Go stretch, go to the bathroom, pet your cat, do what you need to do, and we will see you soon.
Thank you, all of you. Mahalo. Aloha.
Aloha. Aloha, everyone, and welcome back to our panel. This is Nathalie Champion. I am one of the co-chairs of the Honolulu Board of Realtors Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And I'm very excited to have to moderate a conversation around fair housing, specifically dealing with the issues that we face here in Hawaii. And just as a reminder, this webinar is being sponsored by the DEI committee, and you can find us on Friday at the Winter GMM. We are going to be at the Realtor Pride table all morning before the luncheon. So if you have any thoughts or questions or issues that you want to connect with us about, we would love to see you. We also will make it easy for you to see how to take the Fairhaven Challenge if you are not able to today. But if you do take the Fairhaven Challenge today, it will count towards your brokerage's numbers to see which brokerage has the highest ratio of agents who have taken the time and energy to take the Fairhaven Challenge. So please, please take it. We will put the link again in the chat, and we certainly look forward to hearing what your experience is of the Fairhaven Challenge. So with me today are Maria Arrieta, Jack Legal, and Sean Wingate. And so I am going to start off the panel with a really interesting and important question, and it's related to the Fairhaven Challenge. We have about 8,000 realtors with the Honolulu Board of Realtors. And the response has been really low. So I want to ask you, Jack, why do you think there's a lower interest in taking the Fairhaven Challenge?
Yeah, thank you, Nathalie. I don't know what you asked me first, but I'll give a crack at it. I think, first of all, I think, as Bill was saying, I think is such a subtle type of thing that I think most agents think or believe that discrimination or unequal treatment do not exist in Hawaii, you know. And that's one, I think, and that's why I think they don't take the time to really understand what it is all about, because we might have an unconscious bias towards somebody. And if we take lessons like Fairhaven, we will understand that we do have that, you know. It just doesn't come out in the open. And secondly, I think this is not an indictment to our bigger real estate companies in Hawaii, but I think it should be part of their training when they have like, they have like monthly meetings to remind their agents that this is very important in our practice. It is the law, you know, being an agent. So those are the two things that I think why we have such a low response to this Fairhaven Challenge, you know. And it's been for almost 2 years, was it? The program's been there for 2 years. And Maria and Nathalie has taken it 10 times already. So, so that's all, Nathalie, that's what I have. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. One thing that kind of came to mind, you asked this question, Jack, and it's a great question. And something that came to mind for me is just the fact that we are so overwhelmed. We have so many things that are grabbing our time and attention. And sometimes it's hard to prioritize, especially if, like you were saying, we think that we know how we think. And we might not think that we need to take something like that because we think we know the answers already. Sean, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in that I would imagine, and I could be totally off here, but I feel that there are probably many people, including myself, that may think that this really isn't an issue that we experience here in Hawaii, and that there may be situations where some agents where this is actually happening, and it's completely unintentional, you know, that people are giving their opinions about certain things when in fact, you know, we're supposed to be giving facts and not our opinion. And I think that it's really easy for people to fall into the trap because they want to be helpful and everybody loves to give their opinion, right? And so I just think that there's probably a lot of people who are totally unaware that this is a something that happens a lot, and they're just not aware of it. And I think that like this forum and this meeting is important, that, you know, people, to help them understand and help them be aware that it's something that we deal with all the time in our job. Because I was listening, you know, to the previous speaker, and I was like, ooh, my God, like I've done that before, and not intentionally, but it's like, so yeah, you know, to sum it up, I just feel that people probably don't feel that it's such a big issue when it really is.
Yeah. Maria, what do you think?
You know, when I think,
okay, sorry.
when I think of, you know, all of your responses, and I include Bill's presentation, and I kind of do a little bit of recap in my mind, I think about perspective, environment, and priorities. And what I believe is that if you've never really been exposed to any kind of racism, segregation, or anything of that sort related to diversity, your perspective is going to be different and you won't prioritize it the way others will. If you've been a victim of it or you've been exposed to it, even if it's secondhand, it'll probably be a priority on your things to do list. And I think that that's why the DEI is so important and valuable to our industry, because we are having the difficult conversations that are necessary. We are pouring into our colleagues so that we can put this on the table and everyone can prioritize. Because, like Sean said, we may be doing things that we don't know that we're doing wrong because we don't have the information that's needed. We may be, like Nathalie said, running the timelines, the deadlines, and all the things that we have to deal with day to day, that things kind of get swept under the rug. And so the more that we gather the way we are here today, and the more we have these conversations, I think is going to continue to go up in the priority list to number one, because at the end of the day, what we want to do here is just be better and do better.
I agree completely. And I apologize in advance because my parrot hears me talking and thinks I'm talking to her. So she's responding to me and I'm like, okay. So one thing that would be helpful for the participants is maybe just a defining. So Sean, how would you define equity?
Equity, well, it's the whole process of DEI in equity is, the idea or concept of giving everybody the opportunity and the equal opportunity to participate in, purchasing a home, and including, the various different demographics that have had a challenge with being treated fairly. So yeah, I mean, it's just ensuring that everybody has equal opportunity.
That's a great answer. Jack, what about you?
Every time I hear this question about equity, diversity, discrimination, the words of Dr. Martin Luther King always comes back to me. And I like to paraphrase that you don't judge a person by the color of his skin, but by the content of his character. I think if we approach it that way, that totally, we're not approaching the person as is, because we look at the person as an image of ourselves every time we do that. So in that way, we're giving everybody an equal opportunity toward doing something, like buying a home, for example. It's not because their color, it's not because of their belief in something, it's not because of their sexual orientation. It's because there is a respect toward that person, his ability to contribute to the community, and his ability to be able to live wherever he or she wants to live. And we have to give them that equal opportunity to everybody,
I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that raises an interesting point, because I have lived all over the country and I see the discrimination happening here to people who present as white more than almost any place that I've lived before. And so that's one thing that is unique and different about Hawaii, is that there is, in my experience and opinion, discrimination against people who present as being white here. And just recognizing that everybody, it doesn't feel good to anybody to feel discriminated against. It doesn't feel good to anybody to feel as though they are singled out based on the color of their skin. And Jack, like you were saying, to judge somebody by the content of their character indicates that you recognize that we are more than just what we look like. We all have very rich inner lives that, you know, it's easy to forget about when you're looking at somebody else. What do you think, Maria?
Yeah, I agree with the three of you. And, you know, what comes to mind is just being fair. As simple as that word may seem, sometimes we have trouble just being fair, you know, looking at people because they come from different cultural backgrounds, or they know a different language, or they say things or believe things differently than ours. I think if we come from a place of just being fair with everyone and actually seeing the root of the cause of the problem, then at that point, I think we'll be able to perform in that area. Just being fair.
Agreed wholeheartedly. So in the spirit of that, I'm going to ask you, Sean, how do you define and support inclusion in your life, in your real estate career?
It's a very interesting question. You know, I mean, having grown up here in the islands, it's such a multicultural melting pot of different, you know, people of different cultures and everything. And, you know, I mean, me growing up as like a white haole boy and going to school here, like I definitely knew that I was a, you know, a minority. But it's, I don't know. I mean, it's just for me, I think it has a lot to do, obviously, with my upbringing and my background of, you know, who I am today from my parents and stuff. Because in our household, you know, growing up, there was all kinds of diverse people from, you know, we had, you know, people with different sexual orientations to different cultures, different, you know, colors of their skin and everything. And to me, it was just like, it's just normal and natural. So I think that, you know, it's just kind of my part of who I am. And I don't really see it being an issue with me. But at the same time, like I said, is this like, when I was watching the presentation, I kind of felt myself, oh my God, you know, like I've actually probably discriminated against people, but unintentionally, you know, but the way that I presented facts and information. So, I mean, honestly, this whole process and this meeting and presentation has been a real eye opener for me, because you know, we are held at such a high standard because of what we do and the laws that regulate our industry. So, you know, I think it's a learning process that goes on every day, though. I mean, at least for me, you know, and that's, I think, one of the things that's exciting about this business too, is that we're always learning. You know, every situation that we encounter is different with every transaction. So I don't know if that really answered your question, but it's just, yeah, I mean, it's part of, you know, Hawaii being that melting pot that we are, you know. And again, I think it goes back to your first question that you asked, that I don't think there's probably many people who feel like, oh, we don't encounter that here, or we don't have that here, you know. But it's real easy to fall into that trap. So just being aware of it. And as Maria said, you know, making it a priority.
Agreed wholeheartedly. Jack, what about you? How do you support inclusion in your life?
So, Nathalie, inclusion is the third part of our committee. It's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think there is I wasn't born in Hawaii, so I went like a transport. I'm from the Philippines, go to the mainland and then to Hawaii. But there seems to be another layer over here, you know, local versus not from here, Kamaaina, and not local born. And which was kind of new to me at that time. He said, oh, you're not Kamaaina, you're not local. A lot of times also, I think realtors somehow encourage that thought that we only cater to local people and less to non-local people. it happens to me, like I have a listing in West Side. It's in escrow right now. And this one prospective buyer called me. That really took me aback because she asked me, "Oh, is this property still available?" I said, "No, it's in escrow." And then her next question was, "Is the buyer local?" I said, "Oh, wow." I mean, that's the first question that I have ever received. Is the buyer local? And it so happened that the buyer is local. So what if the buyer is not local? If I said that the buyer is not local, what would have happened? How would you handle it then? When I say, well, he's from California or whatever, and from New York, from the Long Island or whatever it is, and he came over to buy this property. But because the buyer is local, the question ended right there. It's okay. It's okay. The buyer is local. So there's that, again, the subtlety that Bill was talking about. Subtlety in our approach in real estate. That there are some questions that is just so put you in a corner sometimes that you really have to think twice before you answer the question. But again, I always, in my mind, I always say to myself, just the facts, just the facts, stick to the facts, not to your personal opinion. And that kind of carried me so far in my practice, just the facts.
That's a good direction to go in. And that was something that Bill talked about prior in the Long Island Divided webinar. Sean, I know that you had a post that got a conversation going about housing costs and pushing local people out. Can you share that experience with us?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
What's that, Jack? Did you have a question, Jack?
No. I thought you were asking me. Go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was I'd made a post about a closing, and a friend of mine had, made a comment in regards to about, prices increasing and the availability and affordability for, the Kamainas that live here. And it was one of those situations that was one of those uncomfortable conversations because, I have, I have feelings for those people, that, that feel that they've been, pushed out of the market. But it's, the interesting thing is it's not only Kamaina people, but that, as you know, that conversation kind of went deeper because of, dealing with the indigenous people of the islands and in the land and all that. So it was like, I had to be really careful and very thoughtful of how I responded, and be as neutral as possible, just to ensure that I didn't go down the rabbit hole, because I could have easily gotten, sucked into this conversation and it had blown up and whatever. So yeah, it was one of those situations that was super uncomfortable. And I tried to handle it as nonpartisan as possible. And yet at the same time to try to make some sense and feel make that person feel like I understood, because, ultimately that's what a lot of people want, is they want to be heard. They want to have the ability to voice their opinions, and I think that, our job as realtors is, like Jack said, is to provide facts, but at the same time to be good listeners, to our clients and to people that we deal with, be good listeners so that you can really understand what they're saying and then provide them with the facts and information that they need in order to make an intelligent decision.
Agreed, wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
This is definitely an issue that plagues us because we do live in a place which is got very high median home prices and we are seeing an exodus of people who are local, who are not able to afford living here anymore. And there is tie-in to diversity, equity, and inclusion when you have an indigenous population who cannot afford to live in their homeland anymore. So I know that this is a challenging and multifaceted issue, and it does tie into affordable housing. So we recently had our midterm elections, and there was a charter question on the ballot that was increasing the mandatory percentage of our property tax revenue to be appropriated to the Affordable Housing Fund. It's currently at 0.5% of our property taxes. And the question was saying, hey, should we raise the amount of property taxes that we're already charging from 0.5% to 1% to be pushed into affordable housing? Maria, what is, in your opinion, why do you think it didn't pass?
Before I answer that question, I just want to piggyback on something that Sean said and just share a little bit about what I think. When I think about inclusion, a lot of you that know me personally know that I was born and raised in New York. My mom is from the island of Puerto Rico. My dad is from Cuba. And with that said, when I think of the word inclusion, I think of welcoming everyone. In the city of New York or in the state of New York, I know there's a little over 8 million people. So to think that it's just New Yorkers that would live there, right, would be very difficult to understand. And there's people from all different continents. Leading into that, I would say that anything that we can do, I mean, I'm coming from the city of New York. It's very expensive there. So that's my point of reference. So even when people say that expensive is expensive here in Hawaii, my bar is even higher because I'm thinking of New York. I'm thinking, if you think it's expensive here, try getting a studio apartment in Manhattan. That said, anything that we can contribute to assist those that cannot afford, purchasing a property, if we're in a position to be able to do that, why not? Why not welcome that opportunity to give them a platform to do what we do every day, which is build generational wealth or help people build generational wealth. I think that as real estate agents, we're very fortunate of, the livelihood that we have and the income that we're able to produce in places like this. So if we have a platform to be able to just plant a seed and just put a little towards that so that people have opportunity, I would say, why not?
So in line with that, what do you think was the rationale that didn't pass the affordable housing charter question?
I believe that, again, it just goes back to perspective and where people's priorities are and what they believe is important and what's not. The wants and the needs are very disconnected sometimes and not in alignment. However, I don't think that's the end of the road. I think that there's a lot of work that together we can do. And I think the main component is educating and continuing to educate.
Yeah,
Jack,
Nathalie?
what about you? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there was a big article. Civil Beat has an article on this, why it failed. And the first reason that was given is a lot of people who are against it thought that it was a mechanism that would increase property tax later on, And even my friend actually called me. He lives in Kaneohe, and he asked me what I think about it, On the surface, it's good because, it will increase the amount, about 8 million, I think, that will go into affordable housing. And And his thought was that it's basically, I'm sorry, it's basically a somebody, a mechanism of the English tax. The second reason was, he said that those who are against it is that it was a budgetary trick by the city council. The budget for the city council is about 2.1 billion. So 8 million is just a drop in the bucket. It's really nothing, And at the same time, they said that they can absorb that and put it in general funds so they can use it for something else. So if they're not gonna use it for affordable housing, it's gonna be the same thing. And that's why I think it failed, because of those two opinions. But I think a lot of people were under the impression that it was just going to be a means to increase property tax later on.
I hear you. And for those people who are asking questions in the chat, just know that we don't have the power to respond on the chat. We can only chat with other hosts and panelists, but we do see your questions and your comments. And I think that Sean, you had wanted to say something too about this. What were you going to say?
Oh, it's just along the lines of what Jack was saying. I think that there was just not enough information and education for the voters to really understand the issue and the way that I think, the way the bill was written. I think somebody even made a comment there that the way the bill was written, it was poorly written. And I just don't think enough people understood exactly what it was, because I've run into the same situation before when voting, and you read some of those questions. It's like, what am I voting for? And in the past, there have been advertising campaigns to help inform and educate people prior to the polls opening so that they really understand the gravity of what the issue is and what we're voting for. And there was none of that. Unless maybe I missed it. I don't watch a lot of TV, so maybe there was. But I just think people were uninformed more than anything, and they didn't understand it, and that just kind of is the same thing that, Jack was saying.
Yeah,
And Nathalie, the other thing that was mentioned in that article, it was really an interesting article. I saw it when I was traveling. And one thing that it mentioned was we are voting for our council members to kind of talk about issues that are important to people. Once this money is in the budget, they're not going to talk about it anymore. It's just there. It's given. So there's no more discussion on it, what it is all about, and blah, blah, blah. It's just that it's given, it's in the budget, 8 million, it goes into affordable housing. So what he's saying is that these people are supposed to represent each one of us, in the council, to talk about issues that are important to the citizens, to their constituents. But because it's already built in the budget, they didn't have to discuss about it. It's there, that's it, it's power,
Yeah, I think that the real issue is everybody can see that there's a need for affordable housing on island. Everybody, homelessness and high housing are inextricably linked together. And if we are complaining about our homelessness issue, then we have to have more affordable housing. I think the challenges occurs when there's a lack of education on how to create that affordable housing. And that combined with our very, very challenging permitting processes here, and the general extreme expense of, supply chain issues, getting things built here, all serve to put up a lot of headwinds around creating affordable housing. That doesn't mean that we should give up on the fight of having affordable housing here, because it really is a question of diversity, of inclusion, of ensuring that the workforce that we have here is housed, is not homeless. I don't think that that's too much to ask for us as a community. So just kind of on a little bit of a different direction, I want to ask, what is one thing you appreciate about living in such a multicultural environment? And Maria, can you answer this one first?
Sure. I like the idea of learning from other people. You know, one of the first things I ask when I meet someone is like, how did you get here to Hawaii? What's your story? And just having that ability to be able to find out where people's background from, what their story is, how did they arrive here? You know, we're literally in the middle of nowhere for some of us, right? That they're not from here. And just getting to know people. You know, some of you know that I love to travel, and I've been to many, many different countries. So being able to live in a place where you can still experience that without having to get on a plane, I think it's a blessing, for lack of a better word.
What about you, Jack?
You know, for so many years, I think we used Hawaii as describe Hawaii as a melting pot, but I think I like more. Recently, I think I've heard that Hawaii is really a salad, a bowl of salad, you know, which is really true, because as a melting pot, if you put a lot of things into the melting pot, into a kettle, it will assimilate a lot of the cultures and beliefs, so that whatever ingredients you put into it, it's absorbed by other agents. But if you're a bowl of salad, your taste stands out, you know, tomato, lettuce, like that. It really stands out and it blends, and then it tastes good. So I think a lot of times we're not really looking for assimilation. We're looking for our culture to be who we are and what we are, and contribute to something that will make Hawaii beautiful. There are so many Filipinos here. I'm a Filipino, so I think we're the second largest minority in Hawaii. And I appreciate that it's closest to the Philippines, and we have a lot of good food, Filipino food. And I appreciate that I'm able to interact with other cultures. And that's one thing about Hawaii, you know. You cannot find that anywhere else, you know. They become a really, really tasty, delicious bowl of salad, you know.
I love that analogy, Jack. That's a great one, because you're right. It's not, assimilation isn't necessarily the issue. There are some issues around realizing that this isn't the mainland, quote unquote, and don't come with that attitude that might have gotten you by on the mainland, of being like rude in traffic or beeping, or, you know. So in that sense, I think that it is important to have some assimilation to a culture which is a little bit more kind and has that aloha spirit really front and center. And that is something which I love about Hawaii and would never want to take away. So Sean, what about you? What's one thing you appreciate about living in this multicultural environment?
Just like Jack said, the food. The food is amazing. All these different cultures, all the kind of food we have, love it, love it. No, but yeah, I think that we're super fortunate to live in a place that all of these people have the gathering of the tribes, if you will, that have come together on this island. But between all the uniqueness and everything that the different cultures have, there's one overlapping sense, and it's called aloha, you know. And as you mentioned it, like, you can't go anywhere else in the US and have this same you know, unsaid, you know, feeling of aloha for other people. and it has to do a lot of with like just respecting one another, and that's really, I feel like, to me, that's what aloha means, is just having respect for your fellow mankind, or your neighbors and whatnot, and that's something that's just so unique to Hawaii that you can't really replicate or find in many other places. I'm sure it does exist in other forms, but Hawaii is very unique that way. So you couple that with the aloha and the food, winners, brah. It's the winner.
Agreed, wholeheartedly. And as we look at 2023, one of the things that the DEI committee has been kind of kicking around is having a fun realtor gathering, which involves having different foods so people can try out different cultures. Yeah, I'll be there too for sure.
How are you gonna call that, Nathalie? Nathalie, how do you call
Say
that?
again.
You came up with a name.
Oh gosh. Oh, it was good.
Something
I
like
can't remember it though.
diverse, delicious, diverse, or something.
Delicious
like
diversity.
that. Delicious diversity.
Yeah, so that we can celebrate and honor our similarities and our differences. So just because we eat different food doesn't mean that we can't appreciate good food. Yeah. So I guess one thing that I have been seeing kind of on the webinar chat is the thought or the assumption that blocking foreign and mainland buyers being in direct conflict with fair housing laws. And it's something that I wanted to address because I think that, yes, blocking people from different countries from being able to purchase would be a violation of fair housing law. But taxing somebody who has purchased something as an investment property that they may not even have being used as housing is something that other cities in the country and in other countries have done as a way to help offset how high our median home prices are. And so while this is less a panel about affordable housing and more a panel about diversity, equity, and inclusion, there is overlap between those two things.
You know what? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but along that note, of the people's perception that property values are overpriced because of out-of-state buyers and investors, if they do their research, they'll find that that's not true. It's just simply not true. Because the majority of the transactions that happen here in Hawaii are local buyers.
That's exactly right, Sean. The NAR has it. We're not even in the top 10 states where foreign buyers are like anywhere near the majority. I think that foreign buyers in Hawaii are maybe like 4%, 5%. So to demonize foreign buyers as the people who are creating unrealistically high home prices is not accurate, even though it might be what people think.
I mean, it may happen in certain neighborhoods, but overall, it's not true.
Yeah, agreed. So, for us, I know that we're talking about how we can help make our clients feel more included. I just want to bring it to a little bit more of a personal note and ask you, Maria, what is something that someone can do to make you feel more included?
I come from, like I mentioned before, I come from New York, so I've never really experienced that exclusion. I have to be honest. And for a long time, I was oblivious to the exclusion. It wasn't until I started moving around, and it's funny, but I actually experienced the first time being excluded in the island of Puerto Rico, which for me is like, we're from here, right? But I think the best way for me to feel included is for people to just welcome me for who I am. I'm African, I'm Latina, I'm Indian, I'm fluent in Spanish. I come from a very diverse background. And just being able to embrace all those things about me without labeling me or putting me in a box would make me feel welcomed.
Love it. What about you, Jack? What makes you feel included?
I went to Las Vegas the other day, and I was standing there with this other guy from Lebanon. And he looked at me and he said, I think you're Armenian. I said, no. No, I think you're Indian. I said, no, I'm Filipino from head to foot. Oh, you tricked me. You tricked me. You're Filipino. So I think for me to be included, to be part of the community, I don't really expect them to do something for me before I do something for them, So that I become more productive to the community, and then they realize that, hey, this guy is not too bad, He can be part of us, he can be part of this community because he's contributing something that is really important. There are some people that I can run all over the place and say, accept me, before they even do something, You gotta do something that is important, that is productive to the community. And then they'll recognize that you have certain talents and skills that can be contributed to the betterment of the community. And that's where I'm coming from, Yeah.
I love that, Jack. That is such a great answer. And I feel that so deeply. Like when you come from service, then people are naturally going to include you because you are giving rather than taking. So, Sean, what about you? How do you best feel included?
Eating with people. I mean, here in Hawaii, like food is like, it's such a an integral part of everybody's background, and it's amazing that when you go with different various groups, like it's all about like getting together and eating and sharing, and what comes from that is a special type of bonding, I think that happens. But also, I mean, on a professional side, this kind of like what along the lines of what Jack was saying is I found that volunteering and donating time, in communities and some of the various different agencies I've been with, they have their own nonprofit groups, things that they work on. And it's been really interesting volunteering and giving times and going into different neighborhoods and meeting people. And I think that is definitely, it makes me feel really inclusive because it's like you're giving back and you can just see how much people appreciate that.
Yeah, agreed wholeheartedly. I really I want to say a huge, huge mahalo to every one of these panelists who've, taken this time to think and give real sincere and present answers to really challenging questions and having these conversations, which can be triggering. Yeah. Like it doesn't feel good to feel like you're being excluded, or it doesn't feel good to feel as though you might be excluding somebody else. And so I just want to do another call to action to everybody here. Like if you have not taken the Fairhaven Challenge, please check it out, because I know we have a lot on our plates. I know everything is like pulling for our eyeball. This is worth it. It is so helpful. It is so informative. And it's so surprising to realize like, oh, I had these assumptions about how I should behave in a particular situation, which were not right. And I never would have been able to know that without doing something like this. So I urge you all, if you can put the link to the Fairhaven Challenge up again, that would be wonderful. And again, we'll be at the GMM Realtor Pride table on Friday. So I look very much forward to connecting with some of the agents that had shown up here. You know, we have, like I said, thousands and thousands of agents that are with the Honolulu Board of Realtors. And you guys are the ones who have shown up, the participants of this webinar. I can't tell you how much that warms my heart and makes me full of appreciation for you who are looking to learn and educate and have these challenging conversations. So yeah, I think that this is a great way to kind of wrap up the webinar. Does anybody have anything they want to add to it?
I would like to, Nathalie, I'd like to encourage everybody for next CE cycle to really look at the at home with diversity certification. That gives you like six credits right there. You know, I think it's 2 days, and it's really interesting to take this class at home with diversity, and it's a certification. So if you have the chance next year or whatever, take it. You know, because it's really nice. It's good.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jack. Maria, Sean, any last words?
I just want to say thank you. You know, I've said this before and I'll say it again. It's a great privilege and honor to sit at this table and talk about these topics that are very difficult to talk about, to feel welcomed amongst my peers in the industry, and to be able to pour into everyone with all that I have learned.
Also to thank Bill Dedman for such a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, thanks everybody for taking the time out, because I know that everyone's busy and this was a big chunk of your day, but I feel it's something that is definitely important. I definitely have learned a lot, because it's amazing how we take a lot of this stuff for granted, or we just don't see it how that it happens and we're not even aware of it, So I think that, as Maria said in the beginning, is, making it a priority and being aware of different situations. I think it's super important. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining, and just keep it top of mind.
I appreciate that. Thank you all for participating. Thank you for being here, and hope to see you on Friday at our booth.
Yeah, see you there.